Joining us now it's Samantha Stein, right?
Hmm.
Although we're in Austria or we're in Switzerland, you would be tempted to say Stein.
Yeah, I'm anglicized though, fully anglicized.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am the founder and director of Camp Quest UK, which is a secular summer camp that provides sort of free-thinking children with fun outdoor activities, but also some mental stimulation.
Okay, you said in your presentation that you started being involved in Camp Quest in Michigan in 2007. What led you to that?
Well, actually, I read about Camp Quest in The God Delusion. There's a footnote early on in the book which mentions it, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, so I Googled it, and I had nothing to do in my summer holidays. It was during university time, and so I thought, yeah, that sounds fun. I'll go do that. I've been an atheist pretty much my whole life, and so it really appealed to me.
The participants at Camp Quest, you said they were between 7 and 17. The age range was really wide, and you said you had to split that at least into two groups.
Mm.
Did it affect in any way the material you had? Did you have to change it in any way to make it fit a little bit more, or was that the only measure you had to take in order to make it more appropriate for the age?
Well, after the first year was 7 to 17, and then we decided that we wouldn't have anyone, the youngest age we would have was 9, because we felt that although the 7 and 8-year-olds could grasp some of the material, the fact that they were usually very homesick didn't really work very well. But I think it's not necessarily the material that we do, it's more the approach that we take with it. So, for example, for the younger groups, we'll break things down into smaller steps and give them more time to reflect on each thing before we move on. Whereas the older group, I mean, teenage brains are, I think, developmentally reasonably similar to adult brains in terms of what they can cope with. So we were able to talk to them almost as if they were adults.
Mm-hmm. Camp Quest is really different from regular school. Is it just by the subjects it approaches, or is it even wider by methods or approaches taken into explaining the things which you want to transmit to the children?
I think it's both. I think we cover things that schools don't touch upon. For example, I mentioned that in my presentation that we did a session on death and what comes after, and I can't imagine any school in the country wanting to tackle that subject with a group of children. But also the approach we take, I feel, is quite progressive in comparison to the school system in the UK. We have a very large number of staff compared to the number of children, so we have about 1 to 5 ratio, and so we can really give them very individual support and individual attention, which doesn't happen in schools in the UK when you have classes of up to 30 children and 1 teacher. So I think that's very important, that we are able to give the individual support. But I think also our approach is wildly different from schools, because we don't approach subjects wanting children to pass exams. We approach the subject wanting children to get excited about the subject and be inspired to learn more, even if they don't necessarily remember everything that we say. It's the general idea and the passion for learning that we want to instill.
Mm-hmm. Since you started at Camp Quest USA, well, in Michigan, and then you started leading the Camp Quest UK project, is Camp Quest UK similar in subjects and approach with the Camp Quest USA, or is it in any way different?
It's very similar in some ways. In the US, they also have outdoor activities, and then they do the mental stuff. But I think the focus in the US is very much more on providing a supportive atmosphere for atheists and the children of atheists who often are bullied at school or are very isolated from people because they don't go to church. And I think in the UK, we don't have that. I think everyone knows someone who doesn't believe in God. So it's very different. There isn't a need for that, so we try and fill it with something else, something more challenging, more critical thinking or philosophy or whatever we come up with. But we don't have the same need to provide that level of support as a community.
It seemed that at some points during your presentation you were criticizing the public school system. Do you think is there any way we can change it in such a way that we can integrate the lessons you learn with ChemQuest?
Well, I should point out that I wasn't just criticizing the state school system. I went to private schools, and my criticisms apply to those as well. I think it is a societal attitude about education that you educate yourself in order to pass exams, you pass exams in order to get into university, and you do that in order to get a job. It's very much sort of a conveyor belt to becoming a good productive worker, and I think it's very difficult to change very ingrained attitudes like that. It would need a huge education revolution to say, well, education is actually about education, not about making them a good worker.
I see. Yeah. You also said that you remember a dull experiment on osmosis, and you said that many people have the idea that science is about gathering data, which is not. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, the experiment I was referring to was something where we were given the method and we had to put bits of potato in test tubes with different water or salt solutions and see how much they expanded or contracted. And I just thought, well, what is the point of this? I sort of knew what was going to happen because we'd just been doing osmosis. The teacher knew what was going to happen. The teacher gave us the method. And it's not that gathering data isn't important. I think too much emphasis is placed on it because science is not just about taking measurements and calculating data. It's about a whole mindset, a whole way of thinking, which is just completely glossed over in the school system. I didn't learn about the scientific method until I started psychology at university, when we were explicitly told, this is good science, this is what you have to do good science. And I thought, why had no one told me this before? It would have been great.
Yeah. You also said that you use, as you qualified them, dumb question as a basis for learning the scientific method. What was the impact with the children? Did the children like it? And did you do any measurements of the outcome, of the impact?
Do you mean the questions where they did the science project?
Yes.
Or,
yes.
Yeah. Well, the children really enjoyed it, and I think it was because we made it fun and we made it quite abstract. We didn't say, are girls taller than boys, for example, and it's very much based in the real world and they can sort of look around and see. We wanted something that it wasn't obvious what the answer is. So for example, one of the questions was, can donkeys eat more ice cream than camels? And I don't know if they can, but it starts to fuel their imagination. They have to use a visual imagination. And I think because they're engaging that imagination, they are much more creative about the ways that they construct an experiment, because they can see the donkeys and the camels and they think, well, okay, we'll have a 100-litre bucket of ice cream and then they'll eat it and we'll measure how much is left. So I think that by adding creativity into it, they were able to be more creative about the scientific methods that they used. And I think on the whole, they enjoyed it. And the creativity, it really expressed itself when they did the presentations at the end, which was, it's always nice to see children having fun.
So let's get back to the premise that science is about gathering data. Did you gather any data on the